The small moon called Kepler-7 was one of the quietest places in the galaxy, and Commander Elara Vance had chosen it for exactly that reason 15 years ago. She had walked away from everything she was, and everything she had done, and she had never looked back. Now she spent her mornings tending to tomato plants in a greenhouse she had built with her own hands, and her evenings reading books. By the light of the gas giant that filled half the sky, her neighbors knew her as a friendly woman in her 50s who made excellent pasta and always had time for a conversation over the fence. They did not know that she had once been called the surgeon. They did not know that Earth's military had created her to be the perfect killer, and that she had ended 3 wars before they started by removing the right people at the right time. They did not know that entire species changed their behavior because they feared what she might do if they stepped out of line. To them she was just Elara, and that was exactly how she wanted it. Her daughter Maya had never learned the truth either. Maya was 19 years old now, and she was studying xenobiology at the Consortium Academy on Valith Prime, which was one of the most respected schools in the known galaxy. To Maya, her mother was simply Mom, who had worked in military logistics before retiring early, and who worried too much about whether Maya was eating enough vegetables. Maya called home every week and talked about her classes and her friends and the beautiful crystalline cities of Valith Prime. Elara listened to every word and smiled and felt grateful that her daughter would never have to know what she had done to make the galaxy safe enough for Maya to study alien biology in peace. The call came at 3 in the morning. Elara woke instantly because old habits never truly died, and she was at the communication terminal before the second chime. When the screen flickered to life, she saw her daughter's face, and her heart stopped. Maya was crying, and her eyes were red and swollen, and there was terror in every line of her body. Behind her stood 4 Valith enforcers in their ceremonial armor, with their silver skin gleaming under harsh lights. "Mom," Maya said, and her voice cracked on the word. "They are saying I killed someone. A counselor's son. I did not do it, Mom. I swear, I did not do it. I was in my room studying, and then they came, and they said there was a body, and they said my genetic material was everywhere, and I do not understand what is happening. Please, Mom, please help me. I did not hurt anyone. I would never hurt anyone." One of the enforcers stepped forward, and his forearms moved in a gesture of dismissal. "The human female will face Consortium justice," he said in a voice like grinding stone. "Her trial begins in 72 hours. We suggest you make arrangements for the disposal of her remains." The screen went black. Elara stood perfectly still in the darkness of her living room. The clock on the wall ticked softly. Outside, a night bird called to its mate for exactly 3 seconds. Elara Vance, the retired gardener who made pasta and grew tomatoes, allowed herself to feel the full weight of what she had just seen. Her daughter, her Maya, her reason for leaving everything behind, accused of murder by a species that considered humans to be barely more than useful animals. Then the 3 seconds ended and something shifted behind her eyes. She walked to her bedroom with steps that made no sound, even though no one was there to hear. She moved the bed aside, and then she knelt and pressed her palm against a section of floor that looked exactly like every other section. The panel slid open with a soft hiss. Inside was a case made of black metal with no markings and no visible lock. She had not opened it in 15 years. She opened it now. The combat suit was exactly as she had left it, and the microfilaments that covered its surface seemed to drink in the dim light. The neural disruptor was fully charged because she had designed it to hold power for decades. The 3 molecular blades were still sharp enough to cut through starship hulls, and the data chip that contained the locations of every Terran black site in the known galaxy was waiting for her like an old friend. She dressed slowly and carefully because rushing led to mistakes, and she had never made mistakes. The suit molded to her body like a second skin, and she felt muscles she had not used in years remember what they were for. When she looked in the mirror, she saw a stranger. No, not a stranger. She saw someone she had tried very hard to forget. Commander Elara Vance was gone, and she had been gone for 15 years, and she was never coming back. But the surgeon had never really left. She had just been sleeping, and now she was awake. Elara accessed her personal terminal and began pulling information with a speed that would have shocked anyone who knew her. As the friendly neighbor with the greenhouse, the Valith Consortium was a 12,000-year-old civilization that ruled over 40 star systems and considered itself the pinnacle of galactic achievement. Their justice system was ancient and proud, and they had not changed their laws in 3,000 years because they believed their laws were perfect. A human accused of killing a Consortium citizen had never been found innocent. Not once. The trial would be for show, and the execution would follow within hours, unless someone intervened. Elara pulled the files on Counselor Mevin, whose son had allegedly been killed. She pulled the files on his family and his business dealings and his enemies. She pulled the security protocols for the adjudication citadel where her daughter was being held. She pulled everything. By the time the sun rose over Kepler-7, she knew more about the Valith Consortium's internal politics than most of their own citizens. She knew that Counselor Mevin had 2 sons and that they hated each other. She knew that the dead son had been the favorite, and the living son had been written out of the family just 1 month ago. She knew that High Adjudicator Torvan was corrupt, and that he owed Counselor Mevin several very large favors, and she knew with absolute certainty that her daughter was innocent. The frame was clumsy and obvious to someone who knew what to look for, but the Valith did not care about truth. They cared about convenience. And a dead human girl was very convenient. Elara stood at the window and watched the sunrise paint the greenhouse in shades of gold and orange. She had built a good life here, a peaceful life, a life where she never had to hurt anyone ever again. But her daughter was in a cell 70 light years away, and the people who put her there thought they could kill her without consequence. They thought humans were soft and emotional and weak. They thought a mother would come and beg and cry and accomplish nothing. They had no idea what was coming. Elara turned away from the window and walked to her shuttle with steady steps. She did not look back at the greenhouse, or the tomato plants, or the life she was leaving behind. There would be time for gardens later, or there would not. Either way, it did not matter. The only thing that mattered now was Maya, and anyone who stood between Elara and her daughter was going to learn why the galaxy used to whisper the surgeon's name like a prayer for mercy that would never be answered. The Valith Consortium had ruled their corner of the galaxy for 12,000 years, and in all that time they had never once doubted their own superiority. Their cities were made of living crystal that grew according to mathematical patterns, so beautiful that other species wept when they saw them. Their technology was elegant and ancient and refined over countless generations. Their laws were carved into pillars of compressed starlight, and no one had dared to question them in 3,000 years. They stood 9 feet tall with silver skin that shimmered like moonlight on water. They had 4 arms and eyes like polished black glass, and they moved with a grace that made other species look clumsy by comparison. They were perfect. They knew they were perfect, and they looked at younger species the way a scholar might look at children playing in mud. Humans were particularly amusing to them, a species barely 300 years into spaceflight, emotional and chaotic and prone to fighting among themselves, useful as laborers and soldiers and occasionally as entertainment, but certainly not equals, certainly not threats. High Adjudicator Torvan had served the Consortium for 400 years, and all that time he had never lost a case. This was not because he was particularly brilliant, although he believed he was. It was because the Consortium did not lose cases. The accused were guilty because the Consortium said they were guilty, and that was the end of the matter. When the human girl had been brought before him, he had barely glanced at the evidence. A counselor's son was dead. A human was found nearby. The human would die simple and clean and efficient. The trial was scheduled for show because the consortium believed in the appearance of fairness, even if they did not believe in fairness itself. Torvan expected the whole matter to be finished within a day. He was reviewing the execution protocols when his aide entered with news that made him smile. A human female has arrived at the citadel gates, the aide said. She claims to be the mother of the accused. She's requesting an audience with you. Torvan leaned back in his chair, and his forearms spread wide in a gesture of amusement. A mother coming to beg for her child's life, he said. How predictable these humans are. Bring her to me and let her grovel. Perhaps if she amuses me, I will allow her to watch the execution. The aide bowed and withdrew. Torvan arranged himself in his most impressive pose and waited for the entertainment to begin. He did not know that the human woman had spent the entire journey from Kepler-7 studying the Citadel's blueprints. He did not know that she had already identified 17 different ways to enter the building undetected and 14 high-value targets within its walls. He did not know that her shuttle's computer had been quietly probing the consortium's security networks since she entered orbit, and that she had already downloaded files that could bring down half the government. He did not know who she was, and that was going to be a very expensive mistake. Elara was escorted through corridors of living crystal that pulsed with soft light. The guards on either side of her were massive, and their weapons were clearly visible. They looked at her the way cats look at mice. She noted their positions and their weapons and the way they moved, and she calculated exactly how long it would take to disable both of them if necessary. 3.7 seconds. She would not need to, not yet. The doors to Torvan's chambers were 20 feet tall and carved with scenes of Valeth triumph over lesser species. Elara recognized several of the species depicted. Two of them no longer existed. She filed that information away for later. The doors swung open, and she stepped inside High Adjudicator. Torvan sat behind a desk made of crystal and gold, and his black eyes studied her with obvious contempt. He saw a small human woman in simple traveling clothes. He saw someone unremarkable and unthreatening. He saw prey. Elara saw a corrupt official who had sold his authority to the highest bidder for centuries. She saw a man who had sent innocents to their deaths because it was convenient. She saw a dead man who had not realized it yet. You are the mother, Torvan said, and his voice echoed in the vast chamber. I am Elara, replied. I have come to discuss my daughter's case. Torvan made a sound that might have been laughter. There is nothing to discuss. The evidence is clear, and the trial is a formality. Your daughter will be executed tomorrow evening. I would like to see the evidence. Why? Because consortium law permits familial review, section 447. Subsection 12. Torvan's amusement flickered into surprise. Most humans did not know consortium law. Most humans did not bother to learn anything about the species they worked alongside. This one was different, but different did not mean dangerous. He waved one of his four hands in dismissal. Very well. Review your evidence. It will change nothing. Holographic displays flickered to life around the chamber. Security footage showed Maya entering her dormitory. Genetic analysis showed her material. At the crime scene, witness statements placed her near the victim. Timeline reconstructions showed opportunity. Elara studied each piece of evidence with eyes that missed nothing. She saw the tiny flicker in the security footage where frames had been removed. She saw the inconsistency in the genetic timestamps that proved the material had been collected days before the murder. She saw the gaps in the witness statements where details had been coached. She saw everything, and when she was done, she said 5 words that made Torvan's blood run cold. Your evidence has been fabricated. The adjudicator's 4 arms tensed. What did you say? Counselor Mevin has 2 sons. Elara continued, and her voice was calm and steady. The one who died was named Keth, and he was the favorite. The one who lived is named Dreth, and he was removed from the family inheritance 1 month ago. Dreth killed his brother and framed my daughter for the crime. Silence filled the chamber. The guards shifted uncomfortably. Torvan's black eyes had gone very wide. "That is a very serious accusation," he said slowly. "It is not an accusation," Elara replied. "It is a fact. I have the original security footage showing Dreth entering my daughter's dormitory at the time of the murder. I have the genetic analysis proving that Maya's material was harvested from her hairbrush 3 days before the crime. I have communications between Dreth and his contacts discussing the plan." She held up a small data chip. "This contains everything. Release my daughter and arrest the real killer, and this can end peacefully." Torvan stared at the chip like it was a venomous creature. His mind raced through possibilities. If the evidence was real, then Counselor Mevin's family would be destroyed. If the evidence was real, then Torvan himself could be implicated for accepting bribes to ensure the human girl's conviction. If the evidence was real, then everything was ruined, unless the evidence disappeared along with the woman who carried it. "You broke into consortium systems," he said, and his voice had gone hard. "That is a capital offense. I am adding it to your daughter's charges. You will both be executed." Elara did not move. "I am giving you a chance," she said quietly. "Take it." Torvan laughed, and the sound was ugly. "A chance? You think you can threaten a consortium with information? You think we care about truth?" He leaned forward and his forearms planted themselves on his desk. "Your daughter will die because it is convenient, because Counselor Mevin wants her to die, because humans are expendable, and no one will miss one dead human girl. Now get out of my sight before I have you killed as well." Elara was silent for a long moment. Then she said 3 words. "I gave you a chance," and something in her eyes changed. Something cold, something ancient, something that made even a 400-year-old adjudicator feel a flicker of fear he did not understand. Then she turned and walked out of the chamber. The guards escorted her to the gates. They watched her leave, and they reported to Torvan that the human woman had gone without incident. 23 minutes later, Torvan was dead, and the consortium was about to learn why the rest of the galaxy had learned to fear the monsters that humanity kept hidden in the dark. The Violet guards watched the human woman walk away from the citadel, and they felt satisfied that they had intimidated her. She moved with her head down and her shoulders slumped like someone who had just learned that hope was useless. They saw exactly what Elara wanted them to see: a defeated mother, a broken woman, a threat that had been neutralized. They did not see her slip a microtransmitter onto the underside of a crystal pillar as she passed. They did not see her fingers tap a sequence on her wrist that activated dormant programs she had planted in the Citadel systems during her meeting with Torvan. They did not see the small smile that crossed her face as she walked through the gates. Elara had spent 20 years learning how to be invisible. Not invisible in the sense of hiding, invisible in the sense of being seen and dismissed. People looked at her and saw what they expected to see, and they never looked deeper. It was her greatest weapon. She reached her shuttle and sealed the door behind her, and then she went to work. The programs she had planted were already spreading through the Citadel's networks like a quiet disease. They copied files and recorded conversations and mapped security protocols. They found the evidence she needed, and they found much more. Besides, High Adjudicator Torvan had been accepting bribes for over 200 years. Counselor Mevin had paid him 3 times in the past decade alone. The current case was just the latest in a long history of corruption. But Elara did not care about corruption. She cared about her daughter. The original security footage was exactly where she had expected to find it. Someone had tried to delete it, but the consortium's archival systems were thorough and nothing was ever truly erased. She watched Dreth enter Maya's dormitory building at 2247 on the night of the murder. She watched him leave at 2015 with something heavy wrapped in cloth. She watched him return at 2352 without the bundle. She watched him plant something near Maya's door. The genetic evidence had been harvested from the communal bathing facilities 3 days before the murder. Air from Maya's brush skin cells from her towel, all of it carefully preserved and then scattered at the crime scene. The frame was thorough, but not thorough enough. Not for someone who had spent decades learning how evidence was created and destroyed. Elara compiled everything into a single file. She had enough to prove Maya's innocence 10 times over. She had enough to destroy Counselor Mevin's entire house. She had enough to bring down High Adjudicator Torvan and half the consortium's justice system with him. She had offered them a chance to do this the easy way. They had refused. Now they would learn what happened when you pushed a human mother past the point of mercy. Elara checked the time. Torvan would be in his private chambers, now reviewing the execution protocols and congratulating himself on handling the troublesome human. His guards would be at their stations outside his door. The security systems would be active and watching for any sign of intrusion. None of that mattered. Elara changed into her combat suit, and the microfilaments adjusted to her body like a second skin. She checked her neural disruptor and confirmed it was calibrated for Velith physiology. She slid 2 molecular blades into sheaths on her forearms. Then she left her shuttle through an airlock that faced away from the citadel sensors. The crystal spires of Velith Prime glittered in the darkness like frozen starlight, beautiful, ancient, proud. And completely unprepared for what was coming, Elara moved through the city like a shadow. She knew exactly where every patrol would be because her programs had given her access to their schedules. She knew exactly which routes were monitored and which were forgotten. She knew exactly how to reach the citadel without being seen. The walls of the adjudication citadel were supposedly impenetrable. They were made of compressed crystal, harder than diamond, and woven with energy fields that could detect a single grain of sand. No one had ever breached them, but Elara did not breach the walls. She went under them. The waste processing tunnels beneath the citadel were considered too small and too foul for anyone to use as an entry point. The Violeth were wrong. Elara crawled through spaces that would have stopped a larger person, and she emerged in a maintenance corridor that the cleaning staff used twice a day. From there, she moved upward. She disabled 3 security nodes without triggering any alarms. She avoided 4 patrols by knowing exactly when they would turn each corner. She reached the level where Torvan's private chambers were located in exactly 11 minutes. The 2 guards outside his door were elite soldiers with centuries of training. They never saw her. One moment they were standing at attention. The next moment they were unconscious on the floor, and Elara was stepping over their bodies. She did not kill them. They were not guilty of anything, except serving the wrong master. The door to Torvan's chambers was locked with 17 different security protocols. Elara bypassed all of them in 43 seconds. When the door slid open, Torvan looked up from his desk with an expression of pure disbelief. "You," he said. "How did you get in here?" Elara walked toward him, and her footsteps made no sound on the crystal floor. "I told you, I was giving you a chance." Torvan reached for the alarm on his desk. Elara's hand moved, and something small and silver flew through the air and embedded itself in the alarm. Panel sparks flew, and the panel went dark. "What do you want?" Torvan demanded, and for the first time there was fear in his voice. "I want you to understand something," Elara said. "I came to you with evidence of my daughter's innocence. I came to you with proof that someone else committed this crime. I gave you the opportunity to do the right thing, and you told me that my daughter would die because it was convenient." Torvan's forearms trembled. "I am a high adjudicator. If you harm me, the consortium will hunt you to the ends of the galaxy." "The consortium," Elara said softly, "does not know what I am." She raised her neural disruptor. "Let me explain. 20 years ago, Earth's military created a program to develop the perfect operative. Someone who could go anywhere and do anything and never be caught. Someone who could end wars before they started by removing the right people. Someone who could make entire civilizations change their behavior out of fear. I was the first graduate of that program, and I was the best." Torvan's black eyes were very wide now. "You're lying." I'm not lying. Do you know why the Crixian Empire stopped expanding 40 years ago? Because I killed their entire war council in a single night. Do you know why the Syndicate of 12 never attacked human colonies? Because I visited their leaders and explained what would happen if they did. Do you know why there are species that will not even say my operational name out loud? Because they remember what I did to them. Torvan's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. I retired 15 years ago, Elara continued. I wanted peace. I wanted to grow tomatoes and watch my daughter grow up and never hurt anyone ever again. But you took my daughter. You accused her of a crime she did not commit, and you told me she would die because humans are expendable. She raised a neural disruptor to point directly at Torvan's head. I'm going to give you one more chance. You are going to release my daughter. You are going to arrest Dreth for the murder he committed. You are going to face justice for your corruption. If you do these things, you will live. Torvan stared at the weapon pointed at his face, and then despite everything he laughed. You think you can threaten the consortium? You are one human. We are an empire. Kill me and 1,000 more will take my place. Your daughter will still die, and you will be hunted until there is nowhere left to hide. Elara was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I gave you a chance. The neural disruptor hummed. Torvan had just enough time to understand that he had made a terrible mistake. And then a precisely calibrated pulse stopped his brain, and he slumped forward onto his desk. Dead. No external wounds. No evidence of violence. It would look exactly like natural causes. Elara retrieved her thrown blade and walked out of the chamber. She had work to do, and the consortium was about to learn that some humans were not prey. Some humans were predators, and they had just made the worst. One very angry Councillor Mevin's estate sat on a hill overlooking the crystal spires of the capital city. It was one of the oldest houses on Valeth. Prime and his family had lived there for 8,000 years. The walls were thick and strong, and the security systems were the finest that money could buy. Armed guards patrolled the grounds at all hours. Automated defenses could track and destroy any approaching threat. No one had ever breached the estate's perimeter. No one had ever tried. Councillor Mevin was eating dinner with his son Dreth when the lights flickered. Just once, just for a moment. The councillor paused with his fork halfway to his mouth and looked up at the ceiling. Strange, he said. Dreth shrugged with 2 of his 4 arms, old wiring. Perhaps the estate is ancient. After all, Mevin nodded and returned to his meal. He did not see the shadow that moved in the corner of the room. He did not notice that the guards outside the dining hall had stopped responding to their communicators. He did not realize that his security systems had been quietly disabled, one by one, over the past 10 minutes. When Elara stepped out of the shadows and stood at the head of his table, he dropped his fork and made a sound that was not quite a scream. Councillor Elara said calmly, and her voice was soft and cold, "We should talk." Dreth moved fast. He was young and strong, and he had been trained in combat since childhood. His hand shot toward the weapon at his belt. Elara moved faster, her arm blurred, and a molecular blade severed the nerve cluster in Dreth's neck with surgical precision. He collapsed onto the table with his hand inches from his weapon and his eyes wide. With shock, he was still conscious. He could see and hear everything, but he could not move, he could not speak. He could not do anything except watch. Your son will live, Elara told the counselor. Whether he stays that way depends on what happens in the next few minutes. Mevin's silver skin had gone pale. His forearms trembled at his sides. His black eyes darted between his paralyzed son and the human woman who had appeared in his home like a ghost. "Who are you?" he whispered. "I am Maya Vance's mother." Understanding dawned in the counselor's eyes, and it brought terror with it. The human girl? The one who was supposed to die tomorrow? This was her mother. How did you get in here? That does not matter. What matters is what happens next. Elara placed a tablet on the table in front of the counselor. It displayed A document filled with text in the Valith legal language. "This is a confession," she said. "It explains how your son, Dreth, murdered your other son, Keth. It explains how he framed my daughter for the crime. It explains how you paid High Adjudicator Torvan to ensure her conviction. You will sign it." Maven stared at the tablet like it was a live explosive. "This is insane. If I sign this, my family is destroyed. My legacy ends, my son goes to prison for the rest of his life." "Yes, then why would I ever sign it?" Because Elara said quietly, "The alternative is worse." She leaned forward, and her eyes were like frozen stars. "Let me tell you a story. Counselor, 15 years ago, there was a woman who did terrible things for her government. She killed people, important people, powerful people. She was so good at it that entire civilizations learned to fear her name. Do you know what they called her?" Mevin shook his head. "They called her the surgeon, because she did not kill like a soldier. She killed like a doctor, cutting out a disease, precise, clean, inevitable." The counselor's breathing had become rapid and shallow. Elara continued. "The surgeon retired 15 years ago. She wanted peace. She wanted to raise her daughter far from the violence that had defined her life. She thought she was done. But then someone threatened her child. Someone accused her daughter of a crime she did not commit. Someone decided that her daughter would die because it was convenient." Maven's eyes went very wide. "I am telling you this because I want you to understand something. I am not here to negotiate. I am not here to threaten. I am here to give you a choice. One of two things is going to happen tonight. Either you sign that confession and face the justice of your own people, or I take everything from you." Mevin's voice cracked. "What do you mean, everything?" "I mean everything. Your life, your son's life, your entire house, your legacy, your world's belief that it's safe from the monsters that live in the dark." She smiled, and it was not a kind smile. "I once destabilized an empire in 6 days. I once killed a warlord so efficiently that his species renamed their word for death after me. I once walked into a fortress held by 3,000 enemy soldiers and walked out alone. There were no survivors." Mevin looked at his paralyzed son. He looked at the confession on the tablet. He looked at the human woman who had appeared in his home like death itself, and he understood that she was not bluffing. This was not a threat. This was a promise. "If my daughter is harmed," Elara said, "if she so much as misses a meal, I will do things to your house that will be remembered for 10,000 years. I will not just kill you, I will erase you. Your name will become a warning. Your world will learn what happens when you threaten the wrong human's child." She leaned closer until her face was inches from his. "Sign the confession. Release my daughter, face your own justice, or find out why the Deviata was. Galaxy learned to fear the things that humanity keeps hidden in the shadows." Mevin's hand shook as he reached for the tablet. He thought about refusing. He thought about calling for help. He thought about fighting, but he looked into her eyes, and he saw something that made his ancient blood run cold. He saw certainty. He saw patience. He saw a predator who had all the time in the world and absolutely no mercy. He signed. Elara took the tablet and verified the signature. "Good choice. What happens now?" "Now you contact the Citadel. You tell them there has been a terrible mistake. You tell them your son has confessed to the murder. You tell them to release my advance immediately. And if I do that, you will leave. If you do that," Elara said, "I will disappear. You will never see me again. You will never hear from me again. Your surviving son will serve whatever sentence your courts decide. And you will live with the knowledge that you destroyed your own family through greed and arrogance." Mevin closed his eyes. "And if I refuse, then I will show you what the surgeon does to people who hurt children. I will take days. I will be creative. And when I am done, your people will tell stories about what happened here for the next 12,000 years." The counselor opened his eyes and reached for his communicator. He made the call 20 minutes later. My advance was released from the Citadel Detention Center. 30 minutes later, Dreth was taken into custody. 1 hour later, the story of What had really happened began to spread through the consortium's government like wildfire, and somewhere in the darkness of Valith Prime, a human woman watched the detention center gates open and saw her daughter walk out into the starlight. Elara allowed herself one moment of pure relief. Then she straightened her shoulders and walked toward her. Child, the surgeon's work was done. Now it was time to be a mother again. Maya Vance walked out of the detention center and into the night air of Valith Prime. She was shaking. She had not slept in 3 days. She had been certain that she was going to die. And then suddenly everything had changed. The guards had come to her cell with strange expressions on their faces. They had told her she was free to go. They had told her there had been a mistake. They had not explained anything else. Now she stood on the steps of the citadel and looked out at the crystal spires of the city and tried to understand what had happened. Then she saw a figure walking toward her through the starlight, a small human woman in simple clothes. Tired eyes, warm smile. Mom Maya ran down the steps and threw herself into her mother's arms. And for a long moment, neither of them spoke. They just held each other. I do not understand, Maya finally said, and her voice was muffled against her mother's shoulder. They just let me go. They said the real killer confessed. They said it was the counselors. Other son all along. Elara stroked her daughter's hair. Justice prevailed. But how? The consortium does not just admit mistakes. They never change their minds about anything. How did this happen? Sometimes. Elara said softly, people make the right choice. Maya pulled back and looked at her mother. There was something different about her. Something in her eyes that Maya had never seen before. A kind of weight. A kind of distance. Mom, what did you do? I came to help my daughter. How Elara smiled, and the smile was warm and tired, and held secrets that Maya would never know. I talked to some people. I showed them some evidence. I convinced them that letting you go was the right thing to do. Maya stared at her mother for a long moment. The woman she had known her whole life. The woman who grew tomatoes and made pasta and worried about whether Maya was eating enough vegetables. That woman could not have convinced the Valith Consortium to do anything. But here Maya was free, alive. Something did not add up. But Maya was too exhausted and too relieved to push any harder. She hugged her mother again. Thank you, Mom. Thank you for coming. I will always come for you, Elara said, and her voice was fierce. No matter what, no matter where, no matter who stands in my way, I will always come for you. They walked to Elara's shuttle together. Maya fell asleep before they even left orbit. Elara watched her daughter's peaceful face and felt something loosen in her chest, something that had been wound tight. Since the moment she received that terrible call, her daughter was safe. That was all that mattered. The journey back to Kepler 7 took 3 days. Maya slept for most of it, and when she was awake, she ate everything Elara put in front of her and slowly began to look like herself again. She asked questions about what had happened, but Elara deflected them gently. Later she said, when you have recovered, when you are ready. She did not intend to tell Maya the full truth. Some burdens were not meant to be shared. Some secrets were better left buried. When they landed on the small moon, Maya looked at the greenhouse and the small house and the tomato plants that had continued growing in Elara's absence. I miss this place, she said. I thought I would never see it again. Elara put her arm around her daughter. You are home now. You are safe. Nothing is going to hurt you. They walked inside together, and Elara made dinner while Maya sat at the kitchen table and watched. It was so normal, so peaceful, so different from the nightmare of the past week. Mom, Maya said suddenly, yes, I love you. I know you went through something terrible to get me out of there. I do not know what it was, and I am not sure I want to know, but whatever you did, whatever it cost you, I want you to know that I am grateful. Elara set down the spoon she was holding and crossed the kitchen to kneel beside her daughter. Everything I have done, Elara said quietly, I did because you are the best thing in my life. You are the reason I wake up every morning. You are the reason I learned how to be happy. There is nothing I would not do for you, nothing I would not sacrifice, Nothing I would not become. Maya saw tears in her mother's eyes. She had never seen her mother cry before. Not once. She hugged her mother tightly, and they stayed like that for a long time. Later that night, Elara stood alone in her greenhouse. The tomato plants were thriving, the moon was rising. The galaxy was at peace on Valith Prime. The consortium was dealing with the aftermath of the scandal. Councillor Mevin had resigned in disgrace. His son Dreth had been convicted of murder and sentenced to life in prison. High Adjudicator Torvan's death had been ruled natural causes. But his corruption had been exposed and reforms were sweeping through the justice system. And a message had been sent, a quiet message, a careful message. A message that only the right people would understand. Do not threaten humanity's children. Do not assume that humans are weak because they are young. Do not believe that you are safe just because you are powerful. Because somewhere out there in the darkness, there are humans who remember what it means to be predators. Humans who have been trained to do terrible things. Humans who have retired and tried to live in peace, but who will come out of retirement if you give them a reason. The High Counselor of the Valith Consortium had sent a private message to Earth's diplomatic corps. We understand, now it read. We understand why humanity survived its early wars. You do not fight for territory or resources alone. You fight for your young with a fury we did not believe possible. We will remember this lesson. We will treat your people with the respect they deserve. We will never make this mistake again. The message was never answered officially. It did not need to be. But somewhere in Earth's intelligence services, someone read it and smiled and filed it away in a folder marked Successful Deterrence on Kepler 7. Elara Vance closed the greenhouse door and walked back to her house. Her daughter was sleeping peacefully inside. The galaxy was quiet. The past was buried once again. Commander Elara Vance had died 15 years ago. The surgeon had died with her. All that remained was a retired woman who grew tomatoes and made pasta and loved her daughter more than anything in the universe. And if the galaxy was a little bit safer because certain people had learned to fear what humans could do, well, that was just a bonus. Elara smiled and went inside to make breakfast for her daughter. Life was good. Life was peaceful, and she intended to keep it that way for as long as she could. But somewhere deep in her heart, in a place she never visited unless she had to, she kept a promise. If anyone ever threatened Maya again, if anyone ever tried to hurt her daughter, the surgeon would return, and the galaxy would remember why humanity's monsters were the most terrifying monsters of all. Not because they were cruel, not because they were powerful, but because they loved their children. And there was nothing more dangerous in the universe than a human parent protecting their young nothing at all.